Michelle Turner is with us, and we're going to be talking about Autism Awareness Month. Is April. We're coming to the end of it. That's winding down. You have a son who has autism.
Yes, he's 8.
8 years old now, and you've been on the show a few months ago, I think about 6 or 8 months ago. We're talking about a method, learn to move properly and correctly, and this is a method that you practice.
Right. One of the things that children with autism have that affects them is their vestibular system, where I mean it's a twist in the system, which seems easy for you. If they're movements, like if you're throwing a punch or pointing your fingers. One of the warning signs of autism is they're not pointing their finger. Well, you know what? It's the twist. Even if they're pointing here, they're looking at their finger. There's a twist in their system, and when that hasn't developed properly, or that hasn't, or that's been trauma to the system, where that's been affected, all of a sudden now they can't. Pointing's not available. I can't. And then when you start affecting like at least 2 other senses, which is usually speech, then your chances for autism are really 10 times higher for infants. And by catching things like that, that's what I come in, is start looking at just how a little child is starting to develop and moving versus waiting to the global signs of, okay, my kid's now 2 and a half and not talking or pointing, and now what do I do?
Michelle, there's so many people, there's so many children affected by autism. Is there a tremendous amount of research going on right now with autism and trying to find out the reasons, the causes?
I think what the biggest problem is that most kids don't get diagnosed, let's say, to an average of 3 years old. But the human brain,
early detection.
Early detection,
like anything else.
But that's not early enough as far as I'm concerned. By 3 years old,
but I mean before the 3, earlier than 3.
Right, that's where we're having problems with the autism. A lot of doctors are afraid of overdiagnosing by giving. But my thing is, well, why do we have to have a diagnosis? Can't we just say, okay, this little guy is having a little bit of problems, let's get in there and start doing it now, versus waiting till they're so far to the other side, and now, you know, and we're expected
How
to
old
school
was
to
your
fix it.
son when you detected that something wasn't quite right?
13 months, but he was not diagnosed until he was just shy of his 3rd birthday.
Then you went to California to study a somewhat new method? Well, maybe not new,
it's
new
not
to
new,
us.
But yeah, I studied under an up in Yale, yes, and I have a practice now doing work that I've learned from her.
So you took it upon yourself to help your son?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you know, my son was walking, but like a drunk. He'd fall down, and he couldn't stabilize himself. And again, it's a vestibular. And I was just told, oh, Mrs. Turner, he shouldn't be walking, just be grateful. And I understand being grateful. I'm the most grateful person. But why can't you feel better? Why can't I feel better? Why can't we all just be a little better? And we have this wait and see attitude that goes on with our children that, you know, I wasn't prepared to wait to see that my child would grow out of it.
But isn't that true with a lot of autism parents? They're taking the responsibility. I mean, the ones that we've had on this program are just like you. They jump in and they start affecting things. I guess the question is, what kind of help do you have? Are there people that are helping you, that are helping other autistic children?
Well, there's help of something. What I do is not covered by insurance, although I'm presently $40 an hour. I try and make it. I can't look at a mom with special needs kids and say, oh, sorry, you can't afford me, you know. So I try and adapt my life that way so I can help. There are state services, but when my son was first young to be helped, he had to be delayed 25% in a few areas. Now that's changed due to budget cuts to your child has to be delayed at least 50%. Well, 50% delayed by 1 year old, the child's really severely having problems. And even if it doesn't develop into autism, we're still looking at major global delays of reading or speech or something that this child.
You said something, develop into autism. So there is a point in time, you are somewhat proving that there's a point in time when we can catch this, retard it, alleviate it.
What I believe is, from watching just my own children and children that I work with, is that I believe that there's somehow trauma to the system. Now, there is genetic-based autism, which is much more famous, like Temple Grandin, Dr. Grandin. But what I think that there's trauma somehow to the system. But if that trauma is not alleviated or addressed early on, it slowly develops into. So no, I don't think you're going to get. My son had vaccine issues, however, and he got the disease. It's not like I think. From the vaccine. However, I don't believe he got the vaccine and the next day he had autism. Yeah. But he was so severely impaired by the infection and everything that it developed into.
But if we don't get to the cause, we'll never get to the cure, will we?
Right, but we have to step back and not worry about this overdiagnosing and look at this infant, let's say from 1 to 2.5 year period of setting up definitive signs that we can look at. I recently just saw where they've moved back where your child, as far as milestones, should only be sitting up and going into crawling by a year old. And I said, I know kids that can walk by a year old, and they're not super babies, but you know, and that's not what we're trying to produce is super babies, but sometimes we all need a little bit help.
There's different degrees and levels and types of autism, as you have alluded to.
Oh yeah, you know, my son isn't that severe, but then again, I don't know because I addressed it at a much early age.
We don't know. It could have. Is he in mainstream schooling now? As of a week,
well, he's been in mainstream, but with what they call an IEP, an individual education plan. As of a week and a half ago, he's off his IEP completely. He's completely at 2nd grade, and he was so severe. He started out at Foundation for Blind Children. He was nonverbal. I mean, his goal at 4, was just to say mom at 4 years old. And he aces his math and his spelling. And
where do you see this a decade from now, autism?
A decade from now, I still think you're going to have twofold. There are a lot of people that expect the state and the schools to fix your children. You know, even a typical child, the school system, I'm sorry, is not going to completely educate your child. You need to be involved and do things, especially if your child has special talents. That's how I look at it as autism. Your child has special talents. Embrace them. And that's, you know what, if you have a child that's just not addressing you, find the one thing that they need you. And I don't care if it's playing in the mud. If all of a sudden they'd rather do that with you, you've broken into their world. Now you can expand on that. But you can't take a child that's this and that's what autism is and say, hey, we're going way over here. And that's what I do.
Go to his world first.
Why not? Why shouldn't I? If I want to get to know you, find out what your interests are and get to know you. And then I can introduce you to myself. That's a fabulous way of just being, you know, interacting. And that's what I do at my place. I have the toys, and so many people say, oh, I'd love to come to you, but my child doesn't want to be touched. And I'm like, they're like putty with me, you know, they just, because it feels good.
And this is a touch system, isn't it?
It's a touch, it gets hands-on, and you can see plenty of videos on my site of me working with various children for different degrees of, from cerebral palsy, autism, all different.
So there, in essence, there is great hope. If you take personal responsibility.
Absolutely, and also trying to remember this isn't college prep just because they're babies. You know, we're only teaching the ABCs and how to count in kindergarten, but I think because of a lot of different videos and cognitive things, we think our babies should be reading by, you know, 9 months old. And it's okay. Let them be successful. Do a dry run of an area first before they're going to a party. Bring them to the place the day before so they're more familiar. You know, do little things you can to assist your child just to be successful. And don't expect them to, you know, it's not going from here to Stanford.
Do you think they recognize that? Did they recognize their successes in your mind?
Absolutely, absolutely. But, you know, you have to be tough too. You know, I also address autism. It's not like allowing them to keep a pacifier till they're 20. Right. They, you know, you have to have rules. You have to have, you can't just say, oh, my kid's autistic and that's why he can't handle the noise. And you know what? This is the real world, and we have noises and fluorescent lights and stimuli.
You know, to tag on what you're saying there makes me think, it's jumping just a bit from autism, but we tend to do this with our children when it comes to schooling, from kindergarten through high school. By the time they're in high school, they're a nervous wreck, they're pressured to go to college. Not every child needs or wants to go to college. We pressure our children from kindergarten all the way, again, through high school. do you think whether autism or not, or autistic or not, we need to back up just a bit?
Or at least help them. Lots of times we have expectations, but we're not giving them the tools to be successful. To tell a child they're unorganized or they need to be more, well then can you work with them with a day planner? I know when our school introduced agendas every day, and my son can look at what he's in 4th grade. It's a great success. It's a piece of paper, but you know, he can, and I can see, oh, you do have homework. It's stated here you have social studies. Let's work on that.
Right.
So
1 in 100, I believe it is now. Am I incorrect on that? 1 in 100 autism?
I think in boys it's down to 170. Averages out to about 110. Boys get hit harder because of the X and the Y chromosome.
We're seeing an increase in that number, that percentage now, aren't we?
Even, you know, a lot of diseases, cerebral palsy is now 1 in 278. You know, and I just didn't know anybody who went to school that had.
Yeah.
You know, it's just.
Michelle, they can find you in Phoenix. Information's on the screen.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Marvelous advice. Thank you very much.